What a headshot! What a head!
How's it, guys? This is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now, everything has absolutely kicked off in FPL. We have CR7 that's just been confirmed in terms of his price, and then we also have deadline day ending tonight, so make sure you guys keep your eyes out for all those juicy last-minute transfers. In terms of my own personal life, it's also been quite hectic with work, so that's why you guys are going to be getting work attire Dayvy in this video. But just because this video is such a big one, I don't think that the smart attire is going to go to waste at all. But in this video, I'll be covering two Cristiano Ronaldo drafts just for you guys. The first one is going to be more of a kind of consistent draft. I spread the money around the midfield and the defense. But then the last draft, the second one, is going to be with another well-known striker up front to kind of pair Ronaldo in that two striker position. So these drafts will be kind of more wildcard drafts. They're going to be aimed at you guys that are wildcarding, but they'll also be quite useful and maybe can offer inspiration to those of us who won't be using the wildcard to kind of look and see what your free transfers and what you can make use of those free transfers with. As I said, those of us, I personally haven't hit the wildcard chip yet, but as you guys know with FPL, things change in a relatively short amount of time, so maybe by game week 4's deadline, you're going to see a completely new team selection for my own current team. But I haven't hit the chip yet, but I still wanted to create these Ronaldo drafts just so that we can get a good image of what our team could potentially look with the Portuguese striker up front. So that's something you guys are interested in? Sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So yes, Cristiano Ronaldo, CR7. Don't think he'll be CR7 for this upcoming season. As far as I know, Edison Cavani has the number 7 shirt. And I don't really know the logistics of a kind of shirt swap transfers and number changes, that sort of thing, as the season has already started. But anyways, the most important thing is that Cristiano Ronaldo has signed back to Manchester United, and he comes in at 12.5 million in the FPL game. So I personally think that 12.5 million is probably a relatively good price for him. I think 12 million would have been too cheap. 13 million, while it would have been quite interesting and more expensive to kind of afford him, I don't think too many people would probably be looking at him at the current moment. So that's why I think 12.5, perfectly fine price to kind of take him at, and I think that he's going to be well worth that value. Top scorer in Serie A last season, so it just shows that he is getting on in age, but he is still scoring goals, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen in this Premier League season. I don't think he's come back to kind of a sit on the beach, relax. It is a return to his old club, and I think he's going to show that at his current age, he can still do it, and he can do it in the Premier League again. So let me know in the comments down below if you think that he's kind of at a good price, or what you would have priced the Portuguese striker at. Another interesting debate that's kind of going on right now is that who do you think is going to be on penalties for United? Do you think it's going to still be Bruno Fernandes? Do you think it's going to be Cristiano Ronaldo? In terms of stats, although Bruno Fernandes has taken less penalties, his conversion rate of them is actually going to be higher than Ronaldo's. But obviously it is a smaller sample size, so you would expect him to have better stats on penalties. But do you think that Bruno Fernandes will continue to take them? Or do you think that now that Ronaldo's back at the club, he's going to take all penalty duties? I personally think that he's come back to dominate. United understand that. They're going to give him every single set piece under the sun, every single scoring opportunity under the sun, including direct free kicks and also penalties. So does that make Bruno Fernandes a lesser option? 100%. If Ronaldo's going to be on pens, I think it basically eliminates Bruno Fernandes as an FPL option. If you guys aren't on a wild card and you want to kind of get some plans going with your free transfers, the most popular strategy right now on how to afford Ronaldo is going to be to drop his Portuguese compatriot in the midfield slot. So downgrade Bruno Fernandes to wherever you want. I think around 7.5 is probably going to be the amount that you guys can afford, and then simply just upgrade whoever you have in the striker department to Ronaldo at 12.5. I'm perfectly fine with this. I would just like a little bit more clarity on what's going to be happening with the penalty situation, because if Bruno is still on pens and Ronaldo's up front, I think that United will probably win a couple more penalties than they have in the past. But this is a massive kind of signing for United, a massive signing for FPL in general. I know that the hype right now around Ronaldo is quite high, so I want to know if you guys are going to be getting him in on either free transfers, or if you wildcarding, what you're doing. If you are wildcarding, I would 100% be getting him in. I just think that if you're going to be wildcarding at such an early stage of the season, you got to be looking a little bit more differential and getting on these bandwagons before they gather steam. And I don't think there's an easier bandwagon to jump on than Ronaldo at 12.5 million with Newcastle at home in game week 4. If you aren't on a wild card, I'll be talking about more later in the week, probably next week in the ultimate guide for game week 4, what transfers or free transfers I think are going to be worth taking out so that you can bring Ronaldo into your striker line. And probably the most popular one will be Bruno Fernandes, but we will be covering some other options and maybe some other alternatives that you can go for instead of Ronaldo at that striker position. But that's enough of the kind of update. Let's get on to the drafts. I'm going to be giving you two drafts. As I said, the first one more conservative conservative. And the second one, it's going to be Lukaku and Ronaldo up front as a power 2. So before we get on to the first draft, something that I wanted to clarify, a little bit of an elephant in the room. You can see there the title of this draft is a negative 0.1 million. And yes, you don't have 0.1 million, or at least I didn't when I did make this draft. So what I mean by this is that I actually couldn't afford this draft, but if you guys are in a wild card, the price rises, the price drops will happen naturally over the next 2 weeks, and you guys 100% will be able to gather enough team value to afford this draft. So this is almost a preparation. Just kind of follow the price rises, the price drops over at fantasyfootballfix.com, and you guys will 100% have that 0.1 by the game week 4 deadline. So just keep that in mind. Please, I don't want any comments down below saying, Dayvy, I can't afford this draft. How did you make it? What's your kind of voodoo magic that you put on your balance? So now that that's out of the way, let's get on to the team. So I'm not going to focus on the bench too much because it honestly is cheap as chips. I've just got a 4.5 defenders coverage. That's going to be Ailing. I don't know if that's the best decision in the world. I think you can maybe go for another 4.5. Maybe a Cody if you want to double up on that Wolves defense. But right now, I think a 4.5 defender is probably going to be enough coverage because most of your players should be in the starting 11 for the respective teams most game weeks. One thing to also note, and why I've included him, is that Omobad Medeli is going to be dropping in price. So that might be actually a way that you guys can afford this draft, is simply just bring him out, let him drop in price tonight, and then bring him back in when he drops, and then you'll be able to afford this team. So first, going on to the starting 11, we're going to be talking about the defense, and I still do have a little bit of a template defense here, but I have included Semedo as a little bit more of a differential. So if you guys have looked at the fixtures, you'll notice that Wolves from game week 4 onwards go on an absolutely stellar run of fixtures. So I think if you are going to be wildcarding or at least looking at some free transfers, Wolves do offer some cheap alternatives. And with Semedo, he's actually just had a price drop, so you can get him for the cheap price of 4.9 million. And we have seen, although that Wolves defense has conceded in every single fixture from game week 1 to game week 3, they have only lost 1-0. And you could probably argue against United, they actually were a little bit unlucky to concede in that fixture and lose it. And I think against Spurs, they looked a little bit better, but I think the stats weren't on their side in terms of shots on target. So I think over these next couple of fixtures, I think that definitely I can see a couple of Wolves clean sheets. And when you do analyze kind of a Semedo and his heat maps, he almost is playing as a winger. In that Wolves kind of a defense, I think they almost play a 5 at the back. They have an absolutely stacked fullback position, and I think Semedo is going to easily slot into that and provide a couple assists and maybe even a goal on the odd occasion. I just think with those Wolves assets, you really got to hope that they bounce back from these losses, as they have one of the highest XGs in the Premier League at the moment. They simply just can't finish anything, and that does worry me a little bit about that Wolves team. The rest of the defense is pretty template, as I mentioned. I still have Sanchez in goal, but there are other options that you guys can consider. A Bachmann at 4.5 is still a popular pick. You can also go for the Wolves keeper if you want to go for a double up, but I don't know how keen I am on a Wolves double up, especially if you're going to be using a wild card this early on, and you're going to be probably keeping them about till game week 16. So I think with Sanchez, Brighton's defense has been relatively good this season, and I think over the next couple they might still get a couple clean sheets. Luke Shaw and Trent Alexander-Arnold, I think Trent's probably the nailed one in this team, whereas Luke Shaw, I could always rotate him. The only thing about United is that their fixtures from I think game week 7 onwards don't look fantastic. So I think with Luke Shaw, he's kind of a placeholder here, and what I would probably do is I would maybe look at a Luca Digne in for Shaw when the fixtures do get a little bit tough. But going on to Trent, I think there's no reason why you guys shouldn't have Trent. Maybe when you look at the next draft, I'll mention why I might not have Trent, but I think right now if you can afford him, no reason not to. I think that Liverpool defense is only looking stronger with Virgil van Dijk and Matip back at those centre-back positions. And with Trent, always got that attacking threat. I thought against Chelsea, although they only had 10 men, was getting forward loads, and he does always look a threat from those set pieces. You'll also notice going on to the midfield that I have still stuck with that 3-5-2 formation, and the only reason for that is that I think right now there are a couple of midfielders that are coming in at better price values than the forward department, and that's kind of the only reason for that. If you guys do want to go for a little bit more of a bench coverage, then I would recommend going for a 3-4-3 formation, and then just put whoever you want at that 4.5 midfielder mark on your bench. But right now, kind of the hot property of game week 3 is going to be Ferran Torres after starting at that false 9 position for Manchester City. So the thing about that false 9 is that it's actually almost just a normal 9 position, because it seems like Ferran Torres is going to be playing as that sole striker now that Gabriel Jesus has been moved onto the right wing position. So I mean, a striker for Man City is always going to be a popular transfer in, and I think that's what we're seeing right now with Ferran Torres. The only kind of question about him is that is he going to nail down that spot? On current form, I think so, but when Kevin De Bruyne comes back into the lineup, we could see maybe him play as a false 9, maybe a Gundogan shift there. It's all up in the air at the moment, but I think on current form, Ferran Torres is probably one of the most informed players in the league, and I mean, Man City just create a load of chances, so they could they'd probably fit me up front and I would still end up scoring for them. We've got a double up of Liverpool options in the midfield, and that's probably the department that I would say you guys must monitor, at least for the short term. And the only reason for that is that Firmino right now is currently going through a couple of scans. We did have a report early on in the day that said he was going to be out for 3 months. That turned out to be fake as usual because it wasn't from a kind of a verified account. Paul Joyce, a verified Liverpool journalist, came out today and said that the scan wasn't actually as bad as people thought, and it seems like he might miss about 2 to 3 weeks. If Firmino though does miss the long term, or at least the medium term, I think that you guys have to bring Dayvy in because Liverpool's fixtures are good, and a nailed Liverpool attacker is always absolute FPL gold, especially when they come in at 7.6 million. So Dayvy, bring him in for at least the short term if you want to, but I would also recommend maybe not if you're on a wild card. Don't you want to plan transfers out? So maybe if Firmino's going to be back after the Leeds fixture, then he might not be the best pick. But I wanted to include him here as he is a good talking point, and as I said, if Firmino's out for the long term or the medium term, 100% a great FPL option. Mo Salah, no brainer there. Out of the premium assets, I would definitely still keep him. We saw even against Chelsea, picked up a penalty, managed to score it, so he is still good value even against those tougher opposition. So I would still recommend going for him, and I probably wouldn't downgrade Mo Salah to fit someone like a Lukaku or also a Ronaldo. We still managed to fit in Greenwood into our midfield 5 after a really good start to the season, and I still think that he's going to be nailed at least for the short term, and that's why I wanted to bring him in. Game week 7, we can always shift him onto a Rafinha, even a game week 5 if we feel fit. So at that price point, he gives us a lot of flexibility, and with the current form he's in, I think he's undroppable. I mean, it is Oli who sometimes does some strange things, but I think kind of benching Greenwood will be even too strange for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Traore is our final midfielder, and I know it might be a little bit of a controversial pick, but if you guys have watched the Wolves opening fixtures, just looks like an absolute beast in that midfield, taking on defenders for days, and I think if he just manages to find his shooting boots, or at least his finishing boots, he will be absolute value for money at that 6.0 price point. And I think if you're on a wild card, you got to fit some differentials, and I mean, why not a Traore with those lovely Wolves fixtures? The final two before we talk about the big man, we're going to talk about another big man, Antonio for West Ham. In game week 3 showed us that he was the best captaincy option, and I was really happy that I managed to captain him. And with the lovely fixture coming up against Southampton, you kind of have to fit in the West Ham attacker, as I think that that should be quite a fortuitous game for West Ham's end. The nice thing about Antonio as well is that he will be fit for game week 4 if he doesn't pick up an injury. Touch wood that he doesn't, but he has traveled to Jamaica and he will only be playing their one home fixture, so he doesn't have to quarantine when he does return to the UK. But finally, the man of the moment, the player that you guys all have your eyes on, it's going to be Cristiano Ronaldo at 12.5 million in that forward department. Now, if you do manage to fit him into your side, 100% captain him for game week 4. The only thing that you guys have to be concerned about is that he manages to be benched against Newcastle and comes off on about the 60-minute mark. And the only reason I'm saying that is that I did watch the PSG game, and that's exactly what happened to Messi. They kind of brought him on the 60-minute mark so that he would get a round of applause, but I think it makes more sense maybe for Ronaldo to get taken off earlier than brought on late into the fixture. So I don't think you guys have to worry about him being benched. I think against Newcastle he'll play, and I mean that Newcastle defense hasn't been the greatest, so I am really expecting United, especially because it is at Old Trafford, to get off to an absolute flyer, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see about 4 or 5 goals here, and hopefully a hat-trick for Portuguese finest. So let me know what you guys think about this draft. As I mentioned, it's a little bit of a conservative draft. We do still have a pretty good midfield and defense. It's only that kind of forward department with only 2 forwards that we might be lacking a little bit in funds. But now going on to our next team, and now you're able to afford this draft right off the bat, plus 0.1 million in your bank, so you guys don't have to worry about any price rises, price drops. But I have made a notable addition and taken a player out that you guys all probably own, and that player is going to be Trent Alexander-Arnold. And the reason why I did downgrade him is to fit in the one and only Romelu Lukaku as well in that forward department. So I mean, just look at that front two, absolute power front two, Ronaldo, Lukaku. It's going to be kind of a tough debate who to captain, especially in game week 4, where both these two players have relatively good games, at least home fixtures. But that's kind of a nice debate to have and a nice problem to have, and I'm pretty sure both these players will bang in game week 4 anyways, so you're kind of in the best of both worlds by owning both of them. But it is a little bit of a debate whether you guys think that kind of downgrading Trent Alexander-Arnold is going to be worth it in the long run. And what my recommendation would be is probably just look at how many game weeks you're going to be captaining Lukaku in, and if you're not going to be captaining him that much, then maybe try and downgrade him and fit Trent back into your starting 11. I think if there was one player, or at least one premium player that I would downgrade, it's probably going to be Trent, because I don't think downgrading a Mo Salah or downgrading a Ronaldo to afford a Lukaku is worth it in the long run. You guys can go cheap with maybe a 4 midfield and then bring in a Traore, Ben Rama, those sort of players to nullify the effect of a Lukaku. But I would still recommend maybe keeping some good options in your midfield, just so if you need a little bit of versatility, you can afford it. So I'm not going to go over every single player again because I know that you guys have just come from my previous draft, so I'm only going to be touching on the players that I have changed. So you will notice the additions are relatively on the blue side of things. I brought in Luca Digne, also brought in Demarai Gray. So if you guys do need some more value options, then I would recommend looking at Everton because their fixtures look good, and I think they're slowly finding their feet under Rafa Benitez. And with Godfrey returning to that defense, or at least that centre-back position, I think that will make Everton a little bit more secured from a defensive point of view. So that's why Luca Digne is a perfectly fine option. Has unfortunately risen in price. I think he's currently 5.6 million, which makes him 0.1 million more expensive than his midfield partner, or at least wing partner, Demarai Gray. So Demarai Gray has got off to an absolute fire for Everton. Off that wing position, looks an absolute threat. I actually watched one of the Everton games. It was when Everton faced Leeds, and he also looked like an absolute threat going forward with his pace, and looks like he has also got some finishing ability. And that's why I think that at 5.5 million, if you guys want to go for a 5.5 option, I would probably recommend him, as I think he might be the best value for money. And out of those kind of better teams in the top half of the Premier League, I think that Everton do fall in there, and that's why I think Demarai Gray is an even better option at that price point. And then going on to Lukaku, no questions needed there. I know that he did have a relatively quiet game against Liverpool, but he's not going to come up against Virgil van Dijk every single day of the week. And against the lesser oppositions, I think he's going to be an absolute bully in that forward department, and I can honestly see him scoring about 20 goals this season. And at that price point, that's going to be absolute value for money. And if you add on captaincy to that, he looks absolute FPL gold. The only thing about Chelsea and Lukaku in general is that the fixtures don't look great, at least from game week 5 to game week 7, but then from game week 7 onwards, he looks like an absolute essential option to own. And that's why if you are wildcarding, you might want to jump on this bandwagon a little bit earlier than expected, just so that you can prepare yourself for those price rises. But in terms of the rest of the team, as I said, nothing much to kind of talk about. The only thing that you guys can do is maybe downgrade some other departments, go to a 3-4-3 formation, and then you should be able to afford Trent Alexander-Arnold if you're going to be downgrading a Luca Digne and a Semedo to maybe some cheaper options. But this is basically wrap the video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like it if you did, and subscribe if you have not subscribed yet. There's a whole lot of questions that I asked you guys to give feedback on throughout the video, so hopefully you guys have, and I look forward to reading your comments. If you have any concerns or any questions, drop them in the comments down below. I reply to every comment, so you guys don't have to worry about me not seeing it, and I'll be checking you guys for some more videos coming up, probably more next week than this week. As I said, things are just a little bit hectic on my side at the moment, but I'll be sure to prioritize the FPL content with the usual team selections, ultimate guides, and best predicted teams later on next week. I'm signing off. It's been Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers. Bye.